recorded? The answer is yes. The webinar will be recorded. It will take a little bit of time to share afterwards, so just be patient for that. We might run another one tomorrow. With that in mind, if you have any questions, on the right-hand side, you can raise your hand. There is also an interactive Q&A that I would encourage everybody to participate in. So if there aren't any immediate questions that we had, what I'll do is I will start just by sharing a very, very quick slide deck on what we're covering. This is really just 3 slides. So what we're going to cover today is, how do I log in? What is my password? This is a very common question. Can I connect remote using my iPad? What is a VPN? Some folks have asked about the difference between this and Logmein. Does my PC need to remain powered up? Do I need access to Wi-Fi? My password was reset. How do I update it? And if I run the Logmein Thin client, does it synchronize contacts? So networking is a relatively complicated field. So what we're going to try to do is simplify it down to maybe just 2 or 3 minutes of high-level design so that you can understand how the technologies work. And then based on that, we can go through some questions that you have. So this is a little bit about your speaker. This is me. Obviously, I run Archon1, love what I do here. It's computer networking. I teach as an adjunct as well. Love dogs, and this is probably one of my favorite things to do, is just to present and talk about networking. So I'll try to keep it short for you guys today, but I want to present to you kind of the high-level design. So just to start, can I just get a quick show of hands? I'm going to run a quick poll here. Is there anybody that's ever worked remote before, and have you ever connected in with Logmein? So I just released a quick poll on your screen. If you can, just take a second to answer this. Are you planning on working remotely tomorrow, and have you ever logged in before? You should see a poll. We'll close this up in about 30 seconds here. Okay, so we got some answers coming in. Okay, so several folks have already participated. We're going to close in about 15 seconds. Okay, all right, so we'll go ahead and just share the results with you guys. So surprising results here. I wasn't quite expecting this. Some folks said it wasn't necessary, so a special thank you for joining. This is a work remote training for tomorrow. So if it's not necessary and you chose to be here anyway, I'm very happy to see you. So thanks for joining. For everyone else that says they've already been asked to and they're comfortable and could use a refresher, that's exactly what we're going to do. So let's go through and just cover high level, basically differences. We'll start with the difference between VPN and Logmein. So you should be able to see this on your screen now. So this is a pretty common question folks ask, which is effectively, what is a VPN? So a VPN is a connection from one client network out to a server network over another public network like the internet. So on the client, you'll run something like a SSL VPN client or a small piece of software. What that does is it creates a connection directly into the network that you're connecting to, which would usually be in the office. This effectively allows you to create a simulated connection as if your computer was local to the remote network. So in other words, if you had a laptop, you went into your company network, you sat down, opened it up, you'd be connected within that network there locally. If you connect through a VPN, you could technically be anywhere in the world, and then you'd be able to connect from where you were, but your laptop would think that you were still on that local network. So things like printers, for example, or discovering other network devices like a local file server, those would appear to be local. So the VPN connection allows you to do that. It's more complicated than that, but just for the sake of expediency today, I'll skip forward. This is another way that you can look at VPN. This is effectively the same thing, just see the client software right over VPN connection into your main office. There's another technology that we've used pretty heavily here called Logmein. So Logmein is a different technology, and the way that Logmein works is you have a piece of software that runs on a web browser here or as an executable. And this software will allow you to essentially mirror what you see in the target, right? So in other words, if you connect from your computer here, you're going to run a small piece of software that's going to connect you through effectively a remote control of a computer in your office. So it's a different technology, right? With VPN, you're connecting and you're actually establishing a network connection. So your computer is kind of convinced that it's on that remote network, even though technically it's not, because all of the traffic goes to that remote network. But with the setup like, for example, Logmein, where technologies like this, like GoToMeeting, right, is very similar. This type of technology will allow you to have remote control of your target computer. So technically, it's not necessarily a dedicated network connection into that network from where you are. It's more of like a remote control of your remote desktop. So let me just pause there, and I'm going to just check to see if there are any open questions that we had. Okay, so I can see one or two folks with their hands up. Just a reminder, if you have any questions, there is an interactive Q&A portion here. You can go up to the top in the Zoom application. You can type in a question. We will get those and we'll answer those as we move forward. Okay, so just moving on past that, that's essentially the main difference. Now what I would like to do is I would like to take you guys through a quick demo of effectively what you would look to see if you were connecting remotely through Logmein, right? This is probably the most useful part of what you'd expect to see for tomorrow. So if you are connecting in through Logmein, right, let me pull this up, you're going to see a share that looks like, you'll see something like this, right? So you're probably going to get something that says invitation to log in from whatever, right? So here, for example, this is our support address. It says to accept the invitation, click this link and log in. Okay, right? So you click this link. This is a little demo account that we have. So I'm going to set a password here. This is the first time I've ever done this. So I'm going to make this password antivirus1 exclamation point for fun. Okay, create account. Okay, so now I've created the account and look at this, right? It's got a computer listed here. Now this is a temporary instance that I've just opened up in Amazon Web Services, and I'm going to pop over to show you guys that really quickly. That's basically just this, right? This is just it's an Amazon Web Services instance that I just spun up really quickly, but this could probably be your desktop, for example. So if you were connected in, you would effectively see your desktop like this, but alas, I'm jumping a little bit ahead here because technically you wouldn't see this because you're not actually connected through Logmein yet. So let me jump back to the Logmein screen, which is what you would see over here. Right? So here you are. Now, if you click this, right, this is the main computer link. It's going to prompt you to download something, right? Or it's going to prompt you to log in. So I'm going to try to log in. Now you see this prompt up here, right? It says, open this Logmein remote protocol. What this is doing is it's saying that this is going to give you the opportunity to launch an executable. This is that client software that I pulled up here in this diagram earlier. So let me pull that up and I'll show you. All right, so first I'll start just by clicking this. Okay, and right now this executable is running. I'm going to go ahead and see if I can share this remote control, and hopefully you guys can see this. Okay, so this is effectively what you would see, right? So you can see here it's connected to my local HP Jet printer, so sometimes your printers will connect. Now within this session here, this is going to be what you're seeing for your remote control session, right? So up on the top, you can basically click this triple button here. This is going to send a control alt delete. Now if you've already logged in, you can click this login button. I like to type my passwords in a few times. I like to do it manually, so you can click here. And now you can see it's actually going through and logging in. So here we go, right? I'm logged in. Now, one interesting thing is that you have the opportunity with technologies like Logmein to blank out your remote screen. So for example, if I jump back to the Amazon Web Services instance share, right, you can see over here, screen is basically blank, right? It's saying that somebody else connected, dropped me off. And effectively what's happened here is I've made a remote connection into this machine, and it's effectively what it does. So let me reshare this here because we actually had a very good question just come in. Thank you for that. So here we go. All right, so this is the question. All right, so the question here is, when I use Logmein, it lags. Is there a way to make it faster? So yes, right, I want to show you here. There's two ways that you can connect. When you connect using this remote control protocol here, this is going to attempt to load that little desktop software application. But there is a way that you can connect in using a desktop application, a piece of software. It's like an embedded web browser. That's going to be pretty slow. So Typically speaking, if you've got a bunch of processes open that are consuming a whole bunch of memory, so I can show you here, for example, like this is, just share this really quick. You can always open up your task manager, right? This is just basic performance. You can take a look. So to get to this, you would right click on the gray button on the bottom by the taskbar, go to task manager or start task manager, and you'll see this. And you can look through several applications, and you can see these are several applications we have running. You can look at your different processes and services. If you see this up here all the way at the top, like if your memory here is all the way at the top, then there's a really good chance that some process on your machine is consuming a lot of memory. Sometimes Logmein could take a bunch of memory, and if that's the case, then the performance constraint could be on your local machine. It could be network related. So if it's at all possible, we always recommend that you connect through a wired connection instead of a wireless connection. We think that wireless I have a love-hate relationship with it. Usually it works well, but if there's any type of underlying network connectivity issue, it'll cause that type of slowdown. So I hope that answers the question. Thank you for that. If there's any other questions there, you can certainly let me know. But that's basically it. I was hoping to keep this kind of short for you guys. That's kind of the live demo. If you have any other questions, I'd welcome them here in the top left. There's one other question I was asked prior to the webinar about the difference between this and Zoom and how we would actually use Zoom. So as I wait for questions here, I can briefly bring that in. So Zoom is a remote access technology or it's a remote presentation technology that you use to do video conferencing and webinars. It's a little bit different than what we're seeing here. So Zoom is used from one person to broadcast out to another to do interactive video conference. Now there is a potential to do what's called screen sharing or screen mirroring, or if you want to call it. When you do screen sharing, you are going to see what the other person's computer is displaying, right? That's very similar to what we would see here, right? If we started this webinar, and we got another very good question coming just now. So if we have a webinar running, right, that's basically you joining a Zoom meeting. So that's you viewing a screen. It's not really remote control. It falls into the category of what we would call attended remote control, right, versus something like unattended remote control. So solutions that are unattended are things like TeamViewer or things like Logmein, right, where you can basically see a list of hosts, you double click, and then you're able to log into them remotely. Things that are attended mean that you have to have somebody on the other end saying, yes, this is okay for you to remotely control the machine. Those technologies include things like Cisco's WebEx, for example. All right. So we had two questions here. One question we had is, can you please pull up the Zoom screen? Logmein is on. Sure, absolutely. So if you're going to log into Zoom, right, there's a couple of ways you can do it. It's going to be a little bit tough for me to share my own Zoom meeting while I'm currently running a Zoom webinar. But once you log in, see if I can find a screenshot for you here. So to join a Zoom meeting, you're basically going to do the exact same thing that you did to join this webinar. All right, hopefully I can find an image that displays this properly. You would see something like this, right? Let's say join meeting, you put in the meeting ID, the meeting name. When you are hosting a meeting, right, you're basically going to see the same type of thing. You'll get these prompts here that say join by computer, join by phone, and then you'll have a little option to share content. So once the meeting is running, you'll be able to share content, right? So you'll find this little button up here that's got a little green arrow up. That's exactly the same thing that I used here to start this webinar. Actually, this is a pretty close view as to what you could expect to see, right? So you would have this, you'd have share screen, manage participants. So as I'm presenting to you guys now, this is effectively what I would see. I would click share screen, and what I would get is something that looks kind of like this, right? Which is showing the number of screens that I could share. And if you click on this, say I clicked on share screen 1, then you would get basically this, right? That would be a sharing view into what you're seeing here. And this, as long as the audio video portion worked, then that would effectively be it. Okay, so that's a pretty close simulation to Zoom. We did have another really good question here, which is, what is the difference of Logmein and RDP? So that's a really good question. So the answer to this question is functionally, they're actually really similar, right? Because remote desktop is a remote access technology. It's extremely similar to Logmein. Technically speaking, RDP operates using something called the Microsoft Remote Desktop Client. And actually, that is something that I can show you here live. Let me share this with this. So I showed you Logmein, right? But we actually do also have this here, right? And this is a example of that Amazon Web Service instance that I just created. So basically, you've got a destination, you've got your login here. Now, if I hit connect, right, it's going to ask me for a password. So I'm going to punch in my password, and now I'm going to log in, and it should connect me to the remote site. Okay, and now you should be able to see this here, right? So this is the remote desktop client. Now, for the sake of expediency here, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cancel out of that. But this is what you would see if you connected through remote desktop. Technically speaking, it's an extremely similar experience to Logmein, right? And actually, you can connect in a very similar way. One of the main differences is that when you connect through Logmein, you're actually remotely controlling the screen. Whereas when you connect through remote desktop, you're going to connect, and it's going to use one of these slots here. It's a bit tough to describe, but basically, there's a way that you can connect in remotely. It's basically the built-in Windows way to remotely control a machine is called Microsoft Remote Desktop. So that is actually how you connect, right? These are all the processes that are running on it. When you connect through Logmein, you're using a different piece of client software. So Logmein, you're actually using the Logmein client to connect to the Logmein server essentially running on the computer. So if I showed you here, you can see here, this is a remote connection, right? It's got the details. This is the Logmein software that's serving to answer the request from the Logmein client. So just jumping back really quickly to the graphic example that I produced to you before, which is over here, right? That's more like this. So Logmein here, you're basically remotely controlling the screen. This is very similar to remote desktop. The only difference is that with Microsoft's remote desktop, you've got the remote desktop client, right? Which is basically, as you can see up here, it says remote desktop client. Whereas with Logmein, you're actually using that Logmein software that you get when you go to logmein.com. Otherwise, they're pretty much functionally the same. So thank you very much for that question. I'm going to flag that question done and move on. If you have a follow-up question there, let me know. We do have one other excellent question here too, which is, can Logmein be used on something other than a PC, i.e. a tablet, a phone, etc.? So that's a great question. So yeah, actually the answer is yes. And I'm going to go ahead and hopefully show this to you live here. Right, so Logmein, if you go to, I'm just gonna do a quick Google search here. Right, so if I search for like Logmein iPad app, right? So you'll see here there is Logmein on the App Store. I'm very certain that this also exists on Android as well. But yeah, so if you download the Logmein client, right, you'll also be able to connect in using Logmein. So if you're running a copy of Logmein Pro, then yes, you can, right? You can absolutely connect to it. Again, you just have to have Logmein running on the target machine. So one question, just since it's related here, one question that we do get quite a bit is folks say, well, listen, I'm connecting to my machine and it's showing grayed out. Why is that? Reason for that is that your target machine might actually be offline. There is technology called Wake-on-Lan where you can technically remotely wake up your machine, but your machine has to be configured in a specific way to start that up. It is something that you can do. It's just not always enabled by default. It kind of depends on how Dell ships the machine and what the network card settings are. So if your machine is offline, there is a way in software to turn it back on. But this would basically be the iPad version of it. And we have another really good question right now around Teams. I'll get to that in just 1 second. So if we go to Logmein Android app, so here's the Logmein app for Google Play, right? This is, again, essentially the same thing, right? This is the client that you would use to install, load it, and technically right here, right, they advertise exactly what I just demonstrated, control computers as if you were sitting in front of them. And I would not be, or I'd be remiss here if I did not show you this. There is also, so this is a question before, right? Can you, so remote desktops, there actually, Microsoft does include this remote desktop app to work remote, right? So it's effectively the same thing. Again, it's a different technology. My experience is that Microsoft's remote desktop is better used for remote administration of machines than it is working from home. You can do it, actually, and technically speaking, if you use a combination of VPN and remote desktop, you're going to get a smoother experience, right? I find that the network connectivity from VPN over remote desktop is actually, generally speaking, a little bit faster. And we had a question before around lag, which is true, right? Because you're depending on the Logmein software for compression and connectivity and such. But yeah, I mean, the remote desktop client, if you're willing to jump through a few hoops and you have VPN set up and you want to use RDP over that, then absolutely, like that's always going to be a better connection, in my opinion, although it does take a little more setup time. And sometimes VPN doesn't work quite as reliably as Logmein. So I guess the answer to the question, can Logmein be used on something other than a PC, tablet, phone, etc.? Yes, it can be. That's the iPad and Android version, and that's also the PC version we demonstrated before. So I'll go ahead and mark that question done. Again, if there's any follow-up questions here, please feel free, just throw them into the Q&A. The other question we had here is a great question. So is Zoom similar to Microsoft Teams? Yeah, so Microsoft Teams is built, pull this up, right? So Microsoft Teams, for those of you guys that aren't quite familiar with it, this ships with the Office 365 suite. Microsoft Teams is kind of, in my opinion, the bigger brother version of Skype. You know, basically, it's a tool that was used and developed to encourage people to be able to talk to each other more than anything else. It's a collaboration tool. So essentially, it's a tool that you would use if you want to screen share with someone, demonstrate, you want to have a chat with them. It's not really used for webcasting like the way that we're doing this here today. Its primary purpose is also not really for unattended remote access, but this is a very useful tool. So if you have a Teams account, like you have an Office 365 account, you can just log into it, you can connect up, you can get live chat. It also has several integrations, but it's not quite being used for remote access, although it is an excellent work remote tool. So if you don't have access to Teams and you'd like that, you can certainly talk to us, right, or anybody else that manages your Teams environment, and be happy to help set that up for you. But yeah, Teams, always really good. It's great for that kind of quick question that you might have for a colleague you want to ping them. It's usually a very good thing to do. So, all right. So those are the main questions that we had. Just the last thing I want to pull up here is just an open list of questions that we had, which I think were originally a part of the webinar invitation. But that's basically most of what we had. Let me just pull up the PowerPoint deck one more time, because now that you guys are all very well educated with this, we can do this. Oh, sorry. So there's two other questions that just came in. Let me just do this before I share this. All right, so the first question we had is, what are the minimum requirements for remote access? And the next question was, is it better to host a meeting virtually via Zoom or Microsoft Teams? So let me take the Teams question first, just because we're still talking about Teams, and I definitely, right after that, I'm going to jump to the technologies required for remote access. So is it better to host a meeting virtually via Zoom? Personally, I prefer Zoom, right? I mean, I'm pretty heavily biased. I chose Zoom for this presentation. It works just like this. There is two-way video that you can use, which is always excellent in case you want to see the other person. I find Zoom to be a pretty interactive tool. There is a free version of it, but it's kind of not quite as enabled as the pro version, in my opinion. I found it worth paying for. But yeah, after you set up Zoom, you'll be able to remotely see each other. You'll be able to ask each other questions. You can demonstrate things, including screen share with video. So you know, that's always been extremely helpful in my opinion. So if I have to say, could I pick something? Yeah, I would say Zoom for hosting a meeting. I think that's a better way to go. Zoom is probably a poor choice for chat, though. I would say if you're looking to reach somebody right away, you'd be using Microsoft Teams. One big competitor to this is Slack, which is another software tool you can use. But Microsoft Teams integrates nicely if you already have an Office 365 license. So I would say for sure, in terms of work remote capability, you could use Teams for chat and Zoom for those meetings. But again, Zoom does have a chat feature baked in, right? So if you've got a Zoom meeting going and you want to chat with somebody, you can use that for chat too. And Microsoft Teams will support screen sharing. So there really isn't a right answer here. It's just how you want to use the tools. But yeah, I mean, if I had a vote, I would say for sure Teams for chat and Zoom for the actual meetings themselves. So I'll mark that question complete. That was a very good question. Thank you. And the next question is, what are the minimum requirements for remote access? Well, at the sake of sounding facetious, I'll say a client and a server, right? That's the two things that you would need. If you do have a server that's running, a server, by the way, doesn't have to be a dedicated machine, a desktop running the remote desktop service or running the Logmein server there, that little control panel that you saw before. Technically speaking, that is the server, right? So that is something that you could use. In terms of the minimum requirements, it doesn't take much nowadays. I think in the past, there definitely had been more, I guess, higher demand for the software to run on the machine's performance. But nowadays, I would say as long as you've got a decent processor, like a 2.4 gig processor, 8 gigs of RAM before you begin. I like to always save 2 or 3 gigs of RAM just in case, because disks do weird things when they start to jam up. And as long as you have a decent internet connection, when I say decent, this is a bit of a loaded question. How do you say you have a decent internet connection? High level, I would say one of the things you want to make sure is that you have a stable connection. In other words, if you've got a Wi-Fi connection that you can connect in locally, I can actually demonstrate something to you. This might actually be particularly useful. So there's a free tool on the App Store if you guys have an Apple device. It's called Ping. And this is probably one of my favorite tools to use. There's several like this, but basically what you can do is you can download a set of network downloads, right? It's another toolkit you can use. These are tools that basically just do pinging of local hosts and things like that. And you might say, well, why would I need this? Well, you have to remember that when you're connecting remote, right, your computer is required to maintain a steady network connection to that remote machine. And there's a lot of ways that can go wrong. Unfortunately, some of the ways that can go wrong are oftentimes between yourself and the access point that you're connected to, right? So if you have let's say that you have a connection to your Wi-Fi and you say, oh, like I have 3 bars of Wi-Fi, that must be good, right? I mean, not necessarily, right? If you're losing 20% of your traffic, but you have excellent signal quality, then you're still going to be dropping packets, right? And every message that you send out across a network connection is broken out into something called a packet. And sorry if I'm getting too far into the weeds here, but I do want to just briefly show you what a packet is. I mean, technically, it's kind of probably this is too much detail for today's webinar. This is work remote, but technically speaking, every single message that you send out is broken out into what are called packets. And if these packets are lost along the way, you'll experience something called packet loss. And that is really where you're going to feel the intermittent connection, that lag that you're talking about, right? So if I show you like what does packet loss look like, I can show you like, for example, if you ping packet loss here, so this is what it would look like, right? If you did a ping, right, to your local gateway, so let's say that you loaded up this network analyzer tool here, right? And you ran the ping tool, because there is a ability to ping your local access point. And I could set up a separate webinar to show you guys how to do that later, because it's a little outside the scope of work remote. But if you ping it and you start to see results that look like this, right? This should be alarming to you, right? If you see this, because this will show you that you're losing packets. So even if you have a really nice internet connection, let's say you have a Fios connection and you're spending $150 a month on it, and you have this incredible 500 down, 500 up, and you're like, yeah, this internet connection is great, but my Logmein connection still sucks. Like, why is this so horrible? Probably you're losing packets to your local access point or to your default gateway. So you can pretty easily pick that up just by running a network analyzer tool or something similar to this, pinging the default gateway. If you're pinging it and you're losing traffic, the connection problem is probably local. So again, that's probably how you could troubleshoot. There's lots of other ways to troubleshoot network packets. Ideally, this is really what you want to see as a result, right? You want to see ping of like 15 milliseconds, 0% loss. That means that you have a good connection and every single packet that you're sending out to the remote site is actually arriving. If it looks more like this, then you know that there's some type of packet loss occurring. And incidentally, this is why I have kind of a personal problem, if you will, with this little icon here. This is what everybody sees, right? Everyone sees like, oh, I have like 1 bar of service and I have 4 bars of service over here. So like, oh, my Wi-Fi must be really good, right? This is kind of a a fake answer. I hate to say it, right? If you think that's really the truth. I mean, it is a representation, right? But you could theoretically here have 3 bars of service, but in reality, you could be losing 75% of your traffic. So that's going to cause a massive lag in your network connection, right? Because you're going to lose traffic out to the access point. So this is somewhat reliable. Unfortunately, this is what Apple has decided to show, and you see it up here in the top right, and it looks great. I mean, it's not really a great way to go, although it does work. And there's also, if you get super, super geeky, there is a way to do the same thing over 4G, right? If you want to actually connect to your 4G connection, see if that's dropping traffic as well. In case you're working remote over a cell phone connection, there's a way to do that too. Okay, sorry if I got too far into the weeds there, but I wanted to thoroughly answer that question. So I'm going to go ahead and mark that one done. All right, so we're actually at 11:31. We're about 60 seconds over. I will stick around for any other questions here, but if there aren't any other questions, then that is the bottom of the hour. I didn't want to take too long. I appreciate all of your extra time today. Let me just reopen the share for the additional worker. So these are some of the extra questions that we were looking to address today. I'm going to go ahead and leave the Q&A up, and see if there are any other questions. I guess I probably have one other question for you. You guys just really quickly open it up. Give you guys 3 answers to this. All right, save. I'm going to run one last poll here. Relaunch the polling. All right. So if there's no other questions, I suppose we can drop. I did have one other quick thing I wanted to share with you guys, if you don't mind giving me just 2 quick minutes here. Okay. And oh yes, in terms of how do we actually get the software on your machine, that's also a very good question. If anybody needs the software installed, obviously, we have the support address information. I think should have come through with the webinar. You can use that as well. Okay, I'll give everybody else another minute or 2 to ask any last minute questions. And all right, I'm going to just relaunch the polling here. Give me just 1 second, guys. I have another brief set of questions for you. Thanks for your patience. All right, and let's see if this came through. Okay, here we go. All right, last question for you guys. Thank you for your patience. How did you like this webinar? Because we're about 2 minutes over. You can go ahead and, you don't mind providing some feedback? Oh, I misspelled the word awesome. That word up there is supposed to be awesome, guys. I'm sorry, I moved a little bit too quickly with it. Okay, while this poll is going, someone did ask, do we need to download anything for Zoom? The answer to that is yes. I will show you how to get onto Zoom there briefly. I'll give everybody another 15 seconds to answer the question. How did you guys like the webinar so far? We got about half the votes in. I'm going to show you briefly how to connect in through Zoom. Okay, so this was what you guys thought. I appreciate that. Most folks thought it was good. A couple of folks thought it was awesome. This is pretty good. I'd like to see those lines reversed. I'd like it to be way more awesome than good, but I'm glad to see that it was at least good or awesome for everyone. So if you've got any questions, you can definitely put it in here. And I guess one of the last questions we had, let's see here, hold on. Oh, I'm sorry. Someone who missed the opportunity for the poll said, I got distracted. It was awesome. And that individual actually spelled awesome correctly. So thank you for that feedback. Not a problem. I appreciate that. We'll be sure to add that to the tally at the end. All right, and then just jumping into the webinar information here. Oops, sorry, that's not what I want to show you guys. I'm going to share this right here. Okay, so yeah, I guess this, so technically speaking, we've finished the webinar, so you guys can drop if you like. We did go substantially over time here with some really, really good questions. I think next time we'll just schedule it a little bit more, but I do want to address these other questions. How do I download Zoom? So you can go to zoom.us, right? And you can download the client here, right? This is Zoom client for meetings. There's also a Zoom plugin for Microsoft Outlook. There's an extension for browsers. There's Intel Unite, things like that. So yeah, there's ways to do it. But basically, if you want, you just go to zoom.us, and then over here, you should be able to download the client. So that's a good way to do it. Okay, so I hope that answers that question. Oh, and in terms of cost, yeah, right. So Zoom has several different plans. I mean, Logmein has different plans as well. So I can show you here. So this is a Zoom. This is the actual cost for Zoom. It depends on the business and enterprise. So if you're part of a company, you probably need to talk with us or whoever manages your licensing, because in a lot of cases, there's some features and functions. There's optional add-on plans. I mean, Zoom makes it pretty easy to sign up individually, but if you've got more than one person, and you are looking for something more than just, like a 40-minute meeting or any of these more advanced features, you're probably better off working with your contact that manages technology to help set up those licenses. There's free versions of everything, but of course you get what you pay for. And also there is Logmein Pricing, so I can show this to you too. So Logmein Pro pricing for this, I think, yeah, it starts up, $30 a month for 2 computers. So that breaks out to, what is that? So let's say like $15 a computer. So you're looking at probably $180 or $15 per user per month, I would say. I mean, as a business, for example, we have a partnership with Logmein. We are actually able to offer Logmein Pro licenses less than this. We actually lease them per month at about $10 a month. And we bill monthly, not annually, so it's much more cost effective. That's just because of the volume of licensing that we have with these guys, and the tool works fairly well. So, so again, if you've got a need for work remote, it needs to be cost effective. I mean, you can always go through the front door, but it's you'll probably get better pricing and better management experience working with a partner that has some type of relationship with them already. So I hope that answers the cost question. And do you need to download anything? That's a great question too. So, all right, good. So we answered those questions. So like I said, that's basically it for the webinar. If you don't have any questions, I'll leave the floor open here for another 2 minutes or so. And if there's no other questions, we can drop. And this is how we can help in the current outbreak. I don't know too much about medicine. We know the basics, wash your hands and things like that. But this is hopefully something that will be helpful along our journey to combat this nasty virus that is circulating around. But all right, so I've got 11:38. If you don't have any other questions, I'll put myself on mute here and wait another 2 minutes. And it was really good to talk to you guys today. I hope you guys are staying safe, and you can go back to your families and have a nice Sunday morning brunch. If you have any questions, we're going to do our best to send around a copy of the webinar afterwards. It might take a day or so to actually publish that, but we will get that live. And if you guys don't have any other questions, then hope you have a wonderful, warm Sunday and enjoy the spring weather. I'll talk to you guys anytime you need us. Talk to you soon.